Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. Are you staying warm and dry?
Boy, I'll tell you, records have been broken. Wonder, the Democrats and the radical left have been on the defensive lately, politically speaking, and that didn't hurt our feelings. But they certainly ought to be quiet about global warming and all kinds of records. I saw snow all over Florida and temperatures that we never had what that was like before. Ours is not the first time ever, but it is cold. So once again, the environmentalists didn't give us the right information. So I guess a little global warming now would benefit a lot of us. But we're back on the air. I have to apologize to our viewers for being a little bit late, and putting up with weather and putting up with a few other things and the improvement in our studio. But I'm sure things will get ironed out, because one thing that we must admit to is some days we find, what's the big issue? What should we talk about? And Daniel and I will agitate, and we'll sort around. There will be a big issue. And I called Daniel today, and I said, boy, there's a ton of stuff out there now. This guy Trump, who is this guy Trump? He's stirring up all kinds of things. And boy, it turns out that a lot of people are loving what he does, and I am very happy with so many things that he has done. But it is still something that we have to be realistic about. But there is a ton of news we had planned, and we will. We're going to talk about the pardons, the economic orders that the president can have, and I'm a strong supporter of economic orders, especially when it repeals the economic orders of other presidents that ordered completely unconstitutional issues. And that's the easy thing to find. And fortunately, a lot of libertarians and good conservatives are very, very pleased on what he's been doing and planning to do. And I think so. There will be some others, the people who belong to the deep state, and the never Trumpers. I'm sure there's still some out there. But I would say, this first few days is pretty exciting about what's happening. I've been a little bit disappointed, Daniel, though, that his dealt with the social issues, which I think is just great, but haven't talked too much about how are we going to just balance this budget. There's some spending that one of these days we're going to have to deal with it, because more than the politicians and elections deal with, there's some economic laws that we have to deal with. So I'm excited what's happening. There's lots of things to talk about. But we will talk about executive orders and anything that we can think of that's appropriate for what's in the news. But to tell you what, one thing that has really struck me as a very, very positive thing, and something that I haven't heard discussed on radio, is how much attention libertarian ideas have gotten. And Trump has not been bashful about this. And even before the election, and even on his other election, he reached out to libertarians, and I keep thinking of the old saying, an idea whose time has come can't be stopped. And I think the ideas of liberty, some of them are bursting through here. And if you look at some of the things that he has done, that Trump has done so far, have been very satisfied. And he even brings that out and mentions that he wants to appeal to the libertarians, and that to me is great. But at the last minute, in the last day, there was another pardon. There were 1,500 pardons dealing with January 6th. That's exciting, and I think that's a tremendous route. But just in the last day, it's been announced that Trump gave a pardon to Ulbricht. And boy, I'll tell you what, and his statement on it just fascinated me because Trump is pretty good at this political thing. So when he knows what's going on, he knows there's more than 12 or 15 of us. So he paid a lot of attention to this. He was on the agenda. He has promised he would give pardon. And what was the first thing he did after he pardoned Ross is he called his mother. I mean, this is just great. Now, I want to read a little bit of what Trump said. He says, his quote was, "I just called the mother of Ross Ulbricht to let her know that in honor of her and the Libertarian movement, which supported me so strongly, it was my pleasure to have just signed a full and unconditional pardon of her son, Ross. The scum that worked to convict him were some of the same lunatics who were involved in the modern day weaponization government against me. He was given 2 life sentences plus 40 years. Ridiculous. And they never really proved anything. I mean, this is something else. Now, I'll tell you, that is something. And I take that as a big victory. A lot of other victories here. But in looking at the big picture, I think the recognition and the respect that the ideas of liberty are getting, and that Ross stood for those things. We talked to his mother several times before this happened over the years, and I think it's just great. And communications are great now. These days, there's a lot of controversy with social media and government media and all this. But I tell you what, I think there's a net improvement because on occasion, it used to be if I got 1,000 people to pay attention to me talking about liberty, that was exciting to me. Now we do a little bit better than that, and I think it's going to continue to grow. But Daniel, I think this is the big picture. We'll talk about some of the individual things, but I think this pardon is just very instructive to us to know that the movement is growing. You say, "Oh yeah, but the Libertarian Party, they're always struggling." And I'm still technically a member, of the Libertarian Party, and I was a candidate there. And that is true. They do struggle. They don't get much support from the media, but anyway, the party itself is important and it contributes to a lot of good things. But the whole thing is there's something else going on there when you have now a president who sort of brags about appealing to the libertarians. I think that's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
That's how you're done. I was going to say I completely agree. And I have to admit to being a little bit jaded, I guess, Dr. Paul, and I wasn't sure this would happen. We had our great friend Gary Haven on a few days ago, and he said this is going to be a litmus test for Trump. Is he going to pardon the J6ers on day one, like he said he would? And this is going to be the test, and he passed that test. But the other promise, of course, as you know, that he made was Ross Ulbricht on day one. It was not technically day one, but very soon thereafter. I felt skeptical, but I think, we do have to give credit where credit is due. And I think the Libertarian Party chairman, Angela McArdle, was working tirelessly to make this the centerpiece of the cooperation between the LP and Trump's people. And it was successful. And I honestly did not believe it would be successful. So I was wrong in that. And I'm quite glad to be wrong. She deserves all the credit for that. And you'd say, well, in the bigger picture, this is a political party. What's the importance of focusing on this one person? Well, it's a principle that matters, and Trump captured it in his own way very cleverly. It's the principle of what was done to him that's important. So I think, there's certainly a lot of credit goes out to Angela and the rest of the people in the party that worked so hard for it. But as you remember, Dr. Paul, we met Ross's mother, Lynn, a couple of times. I remember very well I believe it was in Florida, out in Orlando. I had a long talk with her. You were busy with your fans, but I had a nice long talk with Lynn, and she just struck me as an absolutely wonderful lady, and really the kind of mother everyone would want to have, because she she worked so diligently for her son's release. And to be honest, she kept asking me if I thought Trump would really do it. And I just tried to keep a smile on my face and say, I hope so. Deep down, to be honest, Dr. Paul, I was really skeptical, but I didn't want to say it out loud because I didn't want her to feel nervous or bad about it. I was skeptical that he would do it. And the fact that he has done it, I just can only imagine how wonderful Lynn feels. And it's just absolutely tremendous.
Well, that's wonderful. And sometimes when we take that position of wanting to be cautious about it, and then it turns out to be much worse than we said. This was the opposite. So this was a good break for us.
Absolutely.
So, but I do with another item that has to do with the pardoning of the 1,500 over the January 6th affair. That has to be one of the most abusive use of the Justice Department, the judicial system, and yet, Trump said he would, and he did. And I just think this is a fantastic move, and this is just one of several that's happened in these last several days. But 1,500, and I was thinking. There were some of the people who lost their jobs are going to be reinstated and all this, and they talked about taking care of all these prisoners that they had illegally, and the attention they're getting is very good. But I think, and I don't think they'll forget about it. But one thing is the people who did this to them. And they knew what they were doing. I mean, they were doing it, and they sort of thought they could get away with anything and everything. They were so arrogant about it all, and now they're crying a bit. But I don't think they've changed their mind. I believe in all degrees of nihilism, that the people just deny themselves the understanding of knowing goodness from evil. And I think these people do that, and they're not going to go away if you're going to pardon these people who orchestrated this, because they're going to repent and say they're sorry, I made a mistake. Forget it. These people believe they were on the side of the Lord, and they know darn well deep down in their heart they were not.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, we could probably go on for a couple of hours about this, and I don't want people to think we're being too effusive because we're still very cautiously optimistic. But when something good happens, we have to admit it. And I think, you can go down the list of the executive orders. And I think this is something, I don't know that we said it on the air, Dr. Paul, but I know a few days ago you said, yeah, I hope there's some good executive orders, but what I really want to see is the repeal of the bad ones. And in fact, I went through a list of the bad ones that he repealed. And if memory serves me, I wrote it down, but I don't have it in front. Oh, I think it was 81 or 61 bad executive orders that he overturned, which is really, really good, including, and this is pretty amazing, Christopher Rufo reported this, he rescinded Lyndon Johnson's executive order 11246, establishing affirmative action. Now, that's going back a couple of years, Dr. Paul, and that's pretty incredible. Also banning all DEI offices in government and putting all the DEI officers, sending them home with pay. I guess he had to do that. But that is really, really something. And also banning any flag that's not an American flag from the embassies overseas. I think that may be symbolic, but I think that's very important. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, Dr. Paul.
Another big one, and it deserves a discussion, which has been going on for years, and that has to do with border security and fences, building a fence and keeping people out that aren't legally allowed to come in. And I never liked that. I thought our policies and the way we took care of our borders was an encouragement. And to me, it was actually the illegals coming in with the doors open. That was the reason, and it was the subsidy. Walk in, we're not going to touch you. We're going to feed you. We're going to do whatever we can to it. And so I don't put the fence up as being the answer to it, just because of the enormity of it all. But I am very much in support of get rid of all the subsidies. And I try to get people to understand people coming into our country should be seen like people coming into our house. The people that live in gated communities and pass all these laws, and a lot of this payback has been given, that if they come into their houses, they complain. That's sort of why people, when they found out that, oh, some of these illegals are coming to California and to New York, and some people don't even like that. If you get rid of all the subsidies, you're not obligated to take care of them forever at the expense of the good people in this country. Never made any sense. I think the concentration on this is just my way that I would promote it. And so the fence symbolically means something, and there should be a fence, but my fence is not the visible fence. It's that don't let them bring the Trojan horse in. The Trojan horse is in here, and they're starting to express them, starting to organize. And that's why it's a law and order issue right now. And I think much of what Trump is saying on how to do it, but that's going to be rough and tumble. And some of the people are sort of, get angrier than ever at Trump for trying to sort this out. But I see this whole thing of these open borders as nothing more than a modern day Trojan horse, and we're suffering the consequences. Daniel?
Absolutely. And on that same note, it's been reported that he fired Linda Fagan, who was a commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard, and he fired her over apparently her failure to address border security and her excessive focus on DEI. So that's interesting. I mean, I know you've always said, why is the Coast Guard guarding other coasts? Why isn't it guarding our coast? And apparently it's now been confirmed that the Coast Guard, they were told by the leadership to stand down and don't protect the shores from these illegal boats. And the woman who was in charge of it now has been fired. So I think that's another great move, something really concrete. But, the other thing, Dr. Paul, the other area of executive orders that I think are very encouraging really are the pro-America ones. I mean, he got us out of the World Health Organization and out of this global pandemic treaty that was basically a global prison treaty. So getting us out of the UN's World Health Organization, I think, is fantastic. It's very, very important for our sovereignty. And also exiting this climate change tax is another huge boost for our economy, for our sovereignty, for the future, for our children. So just those two very pro-America executive orders, I think, should be applauded.
There's another promise that Trump has made, and he's doing pretty well with fulfilling his promises. And I hope he comes through on this one. And that is declassification of all the information on the assassinations of the 60s, JFK, RFK, MLK, and others, major figures. And as far as I'm concerned, that's when the real coup had occurred, and the judicial system was co-opted by the likes of the deep state, especially the CIA and Soros, this individual. And that's why we have faced these consequences. But I would say the people got fed up, and they had a leader to stand up and say the things that a lot of people have been thinking all along. But I'm looking forward to that, because I think that is so important on how it happened and what it means, and how much we have changed since then, and in some ways what we're doing and what Trump has started to do, and what I think the American people want, they want that stuff stopped. I mean, I might be overemphasizing the date that I see the dramatic thing, but I thought it was the progressive era that brought us those people in the 1960s that gave us all those tragedies where they just took over the CIA and the FBI and all. I mean, this to me is amazing. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm assuming that'll happen. But to tell you the truth, Daniel, I don't have a full understanding of exactly what they're afraid of. I wonder what the biggest secret is for even Trump to back down, on the last go around. So there must be something in there makes some other people say, we really need to know what's going on. And maybe we will. Maybe it'll happen this week.
Absolutely. And here's a way, I think, of making amends for some of the things that he did last time that weren't so great, which is embracing some of the biggest liars about COVID. He says he'll reinstate the troops who refuse the COVID-19 vaccination. And I think that's a great, great move. Talk about honoring the troops. And, I think you and I both know, I know, Dr. Paul, some officers in the military who had their lives and their careers ruined and had, their families ruined because they didn't want to take the stuff into their body. And it was a terrible tragedy for these people. So I'm really glad to hear that they will be treated with the respect that they deserve for standing up and not being allowed to use their body as guinea pigs.
Daniel, another one that I haven't heard a whole lot of discussion, but I find it very interesting because Trump has suspended the security clearance for the 51. Those 51 months.
Yes.
It's pretty neat dealing with the laptop and Hunter and all this kind of stuff that went on. I think that in a way the 51 are the ones that they're the real criminals. And this is a small move, no more security clearance. But they were the deep state. They were the ones that participated. That group of people. The whole thing's going on in the 60s, and some of them are still around from that time. All the conniving to get us into these wars, whether it's the Middle East or Ukraine or the Middle East or however, it's always been this deep state. So this 51 is symbolic of something big going on. So it'll be good. I mean, that's a step, and that'll help call attention to them by no more security. But sometimes I think some of the people who support them, they've been infiltrated pretty well, and I don't think we ever should wake up today. Well, they're all gone. We don't have to worry. There's no more bad guys in the government anymore. But with the government on our side, believe me, they have snuck in one way or the other.
Yeah, and those. I was just going to say, it's not only symbolic, actually, it has very real practical implications, the suspension of their security clearances, because what happened is the people that had these people like these 51 who had very, very high level clearances, and they were able to maintain them as a courtesy, even though they were no longer in government service. Those security clearances are extraordinarily valuable when you want to go work in the military industrial complex. So these 51 individuals, my guess would be to the person, have exploited this courtesy of keeping your security clearance and have used it to make millions and millions of dollars. So I think by suspending these clearances, what Trump has said to these people, you can no longer weaponize your security clearance against America, against truth, and you're not going to make money doing it. And I think that's a pretty serious, concrete reaction. I also, as a side note, Dr. Paul, found it rather amusing that that Trump suspended John Bolton's security details. So poor old Bolton is going to have to I don't know, take up boxing or something because he's no longer has that security detail.
Well, I want to take a minute to sort of be in a mood to just warn or at least indicate that we do have our plate full on the things that can come, because economic things, they don't listen to executive orders. Economics, they're in charge ultimately. You could do all kinds of rules about how you stop inflation, wage and price controls and stimulate this business and do this and hurt this other business, all that mischief. But ultimately, the market rules, and that means that debt is related to inflation of the money supply, and that's why people are complaining. And right now, with the Doge thing there, we're seeing that Ramaswamy, is not with Cleon anymore. I don't know what it means. But I think it's a tough job cutting spending. It is really tough. I'm going to cut $1 trillion out of the budget. Well, good luck. I'm for you, and I'll emphasize it. But it's not going to be easy. So that's what's going on, and the spending is going to continue, and we have to deal with that. But in spite of this all, one announcement today I heard was a $500 billion plan over a couple years to promote AI. Well, I think AI scientifically is pretty amazing. I have my pros and cons on it, but it certainly ought to be dealt with and permitted, and as long as people aren't lying, cheating, and killing, they do what they want. And I think, but it depends on the government. The problem is that they're going to pump in $500 billion to this to help build the infrastructure. I think people should question that, because that contradicts the whole idea that we're going to cut $1 trillion out of the budget this week. I don't think it's going to be that easy. And so we're going to see some fireworks, and I think they will be things that I wish all we need to do is call up the president and say, hey, we need one more executive order to take care of this. Even if the president did that, say, I think the budget should be balanced. Tomorrow, we're going to have an executive order to balance the budget. Well, I'll tell you, it's not going to be that easy, because that represents a whole ideology on why they spend money. But nevertheless, the ideology of liberty has broken through, even with the desire for Trump to move us in the right direction. He's really taking his hat off to libertarians. And so how he got there, we don't know exactly, but and it might not be exactly what we want, but boy, when you take a list of this thing, Daniel, there's some really great stuff. Talking about getting rid of DEI and ESG, that is pretty fantastic. So I think that I think overall we are living in a very interesting week, but that doesn't mean you should let our guard down, and I think that'll be part of our job. Daniel?
Yeah, I have just two short things. I do want to say something that I think is potentially negative, because I don't want people to get the wrong impression. But before I do that, there was something fascinating. I think it was yesterday, yes, where President Trump signed an executive order to pause foreign development assistance, and I initially wrote that off because that wouldn't necessarily stop foreign military aid. And so at first I sort of wrote it off, but then someone on X brought up very, very interesting phrase in section 1 of the executive order. And I don't want to go too far into the trees here, Dr. Paul, but this is something that's fascinating. And I just wonder who drafted this order, because it's really interesting if you listen. He says, the United States foreign aid industry and bureaucracy are not aligned with American interests, and in many cases antithetical to American values. They, meaning the foreign aid industry, serves to destabilize world peace by promoting ideas in foreign countries that are directly inverse to harmonious and stable relations internal to and among countries. Now, that's kind of a lot of words saying that basically our foreign aid actually disrupts countries overseas and doesn't cause harmony. It doesn't cause peace, but rather the opposite. That is a fascinating statement, and I look forward to seeing how that might be further developed. If that's indeed the case, and that's how he's thinking on it, it's very good. Now, the other part that's not so good is that he's given General Kellogg 100 days to end the Russia-Ukraine war. And I think that's unrealistic. The idea that you're going to go over there and force them to end it is unrealistic. And I very much fear, Dr. Paul, that someone is giving Trump incorrect information about the war. And I don't know who that is. Maybe it's Kellogg himself. But he gave out a statement where he urged Russia to stop the war. He's made a statement that Russia has lost 1 million people in the war, which is just absolutely not true. So if he is quoting, and I think a lot of these sources are Ukrainian sources, so I just hope that he's listening to people who are giving him right information. You're not going to rush in there and tell Russia, you've got to stop this fighting, because they view it as an existential war. He's setting himself up for a big loss if he thinks he's going to do it this way. And I just hope that I urge him to listen to some outside objective sources on this, because it could be a huge foreign policy black eye for him if he proceeds with this wrong information about the causes of the war, which, Dr. Paul, we've talked about forever, the causes of the war and how it can actually be ended. So that's all I have, Dr. Paul. Over to you for the end.
Well, it was a mouthful, and that was very good. So, and you are getting ready to close. Now, in your statement, you emphasized how our foreign policy and military operations overseas actually hurts what they pretend they're doing. That's not a big surprise, but people really ought to realize that's what's happening, that things backfire on them. But the other thing, the other half of this is that the foreign aid and the military aid and the interference overseas, backfires on us. But what about the cost here at home? When you think about, all the wars of the drafts and the killing and all the things that go on, and the inflation and the price paid, that the deficits, all these problems come. So eventually it hits home, and they're victims. And I think these victims right now are speaking out, and they're getting some answers. But I work real hard to make sure they understand exactly how this comes about, because spending money is difficult to cut, but people don't realize that spending money has a lot to do with the price of a loaf of bread. And when that happens, they just can't be careless with economic policy. They have to think about monetary policy. And I've talked about that once in a while over the years. But I do want to thank everybody for tuning in today. And once again, I want to say we're sorry that our program hasn't worked out where we were in our studio, but we're still working on that. And it looks to me like it's not going to snow today, and that's a big thing. So that means that we don't have to worry about global warming. We have a little bit of chilly weather. So anyway, thank you for tuning in today, and please come back to the Liberty Report soon.